Welcome to the webinar, Grant Story Funnel. So, who am I to do this? Well, very brief introduction. I went from having a whole bunch of grant proposals rejected to then, once I got some things sorted out, to really having a surprising string of successes. And I've told that story before for those of you who haven't joined me, and I won't go into detail now, but it was very astounding how much I was able to turn things around. And in 2009, I started helping other people with this through initially consulting and then creating some trainings for people and then going more intensively into the trainings and so on. And I've helped at least 520 people, probably more than that, in doing all of this. I love seeing the result of people getting more clarity, getting more insight, having more fun in writing their applications, writing less rejected applications, clogging the system up less with proposals that really aren't that good. I love helping with all of those things. And I love the creative aspect of this idea of writing a powerful grant proposal. That really jazzes me. So I've seen a lot of what works and what doesn't. And as a result of that, which I could tell lots of stories, but I'm not going to today because we got a lot to cover, I developed the Grant Story Funnel to help researchers like you. I basically taking where so many different clients have struggled and gotten off track and created problems in their proposals that have been difficult to resolve and that have triggered things with the reviewers. I ultimately looked at all this and said, there's got to be a systematic way of distilling all of the various advice I've been giving clients in my trainings and in more intimate work, like one-on-one work, where we talk directly about proposals. There must be a way of systematizing this and having it be more step-by-step. So it's very clear what to do in each part. Now, this is aimed towards the specific aims page right now. We have a story funnel that we've developed for the rest of an NIH proposal or started developing, but the most important part of your proposal is clearly your specific aims page if you're writing NIH proposals. If it's NSF proposals, it's your project summary, and so on. But almost every proposal mechanism has some kind of summary up front of what it is that you're proposing to do. And so this is designed to get that together. And once you have that together, then the rest is a lot easier. I wouldn't say trivial, but it's a heck of a lot easier. So we'll really focus just on the specific aims story funnel today. So how does it apply in the real world to funded R01s? Well, on the rest of the training, I am going to go through each step and give you at least one example of each of these components, how you bring them together, what you do with these components to make your proposal, your specific aims page, really sing. Now, all of the examples, except for at the very end, all of the examples are from funded R01s, all of them. So that's the cool thing, is that you know that what I'm showing you has worked in the past, and that's a good thing, except for the examples at the end that I show you of things that failed, and that's a specific different section. So my goal for you is that you can have more fun and clarity in writing your proposals, that you can be more effective getting your point across to your reviewers and your program officers, so important, that you can engage your reader, because look, if they start reading your proposal and they just immediately get bored or confused, that's not very engaging. And then what's the likelihood that they're going to get excited about going in and fighting for your proposal in study section? It's pretty low. And so those are just a few of the reasons I'm doing this. And some people might say, if this is like the cream of the crop, the best thing you've developed, Morgan, in 10 years of doing this, why are you sharing this openly and for free? So I have a couple reasons. One is I just want to help the community write better proposals. Really, it's such a shame that so much time is wasted on everybody's part on rejected proposals, both on the writer's part. Writers spend tons of time writing things that just then get rejected and go on the scrap heap of rejected proposals, but also the reviewing time and the NIH administrative time. think if we could reduce that and spend some of the money that's done for all of that reviewing process, if we spend it on giving out more grants to support the research, wouldn't that be awesome? So that's a big reason that I do this stuff. And the second thing is, if I know that if you like this approach, you might become a client, you're probably more likely to become a client. So I want to share this openly with you, and so that you can see what it is that I have developed to help you in your proposals. All right, so before we dive in with the details, a few quick caveats and considerations. This was designed around an NIH proposal specific aims page. Now, I've looked at how this applies to other proposal types, and it does apply to other proposal types. Like, I have an example, a client of mine got a funded MIRA award, and those don't have a specific aims page. Yet the intro to that MIRA proposal follows a lot of what I'll be discussing today. And similar for an NSF project summary. It follows much of what I'll be discussing, although there are some tweaks if you're going to use this for an NSF proposal. So as I develop some further training on this, I'll show more specifically how it applies to those types. But since much of this audience is focused on NIH proposals, that's the main thing I'm focusing on today. And I have to go fast to cover everything. So I'll only give one example in most parts. There's not time for more, but when I've done this as a live presentation for 2 days, I usually have 6 or 7 examples of each one of these points. And there's nothing like compressing 2 days down into a little over an hour. So anyway, I do the best I can. There are a lot of nuances here. Be aware that the concepts are simple, but the practical application, like actually putting this, pen to paper, is often challenging. Now, what is the grant story funnel? A few bullet points. So the idea behind this is that we need to get our reviewers fighting for us in study section. That is our goal. Because with over 100 proposals that any given study section is going to handle typically, and over 10 proposals that each reviewer typically has to review, there are only, out of those 10 proposals, 1 or 2 of them that are likely to receive funding. That's just the current ratios, with pay lines between 10 and 20% in most institutes at NIH, and some below 10%, like the NIAID last time I checked was around 8%. So in any case, to be in that top 10% or so, we have to have the reviewer actually be excited to go advocate for us. It's not enough to just be like, oh, this is pretty good. Pretty good is not enough. So we have to create 2 core emotions. And there are a lot of associated emotions that I talk about other times, but the core emotions that we're looking for are trust and desire. And we have to generate both. And if we don't do both, we're likely not going to get them fighting for us. And most people really struggle with this. They often create an imbalance in the force, Luke. In other words, too much focus on one or the other of trust or desire, or a focus on neither of those and creating neither thing. That's even worse. And we really have to build both together. And in order to do, the only way that I have seen that is effective to do that is to tell a coherent story. I have seen no other way that is as effective as that. And the idea of tell a story, I've often worked with clients on that, and we've worked on what are components of story and so on. And still, it's kind of, for scientists and researchers, it can often be nebulous and frustrating. What is a good story? How do I build it? What do I do? And, I do my very best to show on applications, but this is the next level. This is taking it to the next level by developing a step-by-step structure you can use for telling a great story. And I've never seen anybody do this before. This is something I just came up with after getting frustrated trying to convey the idea of how to tell a great story over the last 10 years. That's what it's for. Now, you might wonder, what is the funnel part of this thing. And it refers to this concept that our story has to start with that big picture and then work down into the nitty-gritty details. And it's not good to do it in the opposite direction because then people get lost and confused. So without this funnel structure, we really risk confusing or losing our readers, and not good. So there's a lot more about funnels, but these are the basics. So when we put these together, we have this thing called the grant story funnel. All right, so putting these together, we have the grant story funnel. And what I did to really illustrate how this works in real application is I came up with a very specific color code that takes you step by step through this grant story funnel. Now, is this, if you're missing something or if you don't follow this exactly, are you not going to get funding? I can't say that. What I can say is these are the most common elements I've seen in successful proposals. Some have mixed things up a little bit. Some have left a few things out. And so there are some minor deviations from this. But I've only seen one example, actually, of a successful proposal that completely sort of turns this around. And even that proposal still had all of these elements. They were just much harder to dig for. And those people who were successful were very well known in their field for the work that they had done. And so because they were so well known, the reviewers gave them more leeway. And I think if they had been lesser known people, they wouldn't have gotten away with it. And I actually rewrote that one into this. And the person who had gotten funding for that application said, wow, that's better. So anyway, that's the grant story funnel. The hook is the first part of this grant story funnel. And one thing you'll notice as I go through this funnel is that each component of the funnel has, in parentheses, what is the primary objective or primary goal of that step of the funnel. And that is, so in this case, it is building desire. And I also listed that here. At the beginning of the proposal, we really want to engage the reviewer. We want to get them excited to learn more, interested to read more. This is one of the big problems. I hear many clients say, I got the reviews back, and it's as if they didn't read the proposal. And that is often true. If you bore them, if you frustrate them, they may well skip reading a lot of the stuff that you have on your aims page and a lot of the stuff you have in other places. And they might just go hunting for things in your approach section to pick on because they are already ready to reject you. And so in order to prevent that, we have to get them engaged. It's our job as the writer to get them engaged. And that's what the hook does. We get them interested in finding out more. And one of the key nuances of this is getting it at the right level, really conveying, hey, this is something that's just for you, dear reader, dear reviewer. It's something that you'll be interested in, something that you want to chew on mentally. And so the hook should do that. So I'm going to give two illustrations of the hook because it's so important. If people really struggle with this, I'd say this is a number one area of struggle, is writing an appropriate hook. Because another thing a hook does that I didn't list on this page, the previous page, is it establishes the frame of what the proposal is going to be about. And that's super important because if you establish one frame at the beginning in your hook, and then the other pieces of the story do not follow that appropriately, then it really confuses the reviewer and lead to all sorts of problems. We're doing a lot in often a very short sentence. So this is an example from a client proposal. And it says, after years of assuming that neurological diseases are caused by direct damage to neurons, we know that impaired astrocyte physiology and function precedes and is essential for the progression of many of these diseases. So this hook has several things going on, lots of things. And one of the key things is it's bringing up recency. It's bringing up, hey, there's something new going on in the field. There's something interesting going on. It's not the same old conventional wisdom anymore. And we really need to pay attention to this. So it gets to reviewer curiosity, reviewer interest. It gets a little bit at controversy. We don't want it to be too controversial, but some controversy to really engage the reader and say, okay, this is recent, this is interesting, let's find out more. And I'm just talking about the orange at the top. The lower part is the subsequent why elaboration we'll talk about in a second. I just showed that for context. Okay, so then there's another example. This is probably one of my favorites recently from a client. Breast conservation therapy plus radiation has been shown to result in survival rates equal to mastectomy in prospective randomized trials. However, several of these studies have also demonstrated that BCT results in higher local recurrence rates. So what this hook is doing is conveying that, hey, there's sort of a conventional wisdom, and yet there's something weird, there's something wrong happening with this conventional wisdom, something that doesn't make sense or doesn't seem to fit. So it brings up controversy without pointing any fingers at people in the community. You don't want to say they're wrong or these people are bad, because what if these people are one of your reviewers? No, that's not what we're doing here. We're just saying we have data out here in the field that conflicts, that doesn't make sense together. How are we going to bring this together? So in this case, this hook sets the stage for the rest of the proposal, with the reader reading this to find out, okay, how are you going to resolve this conflict between these two different pieces of data you have presented? And for many readers, this will, if they're interested in this field, it will provide a big sense of curiosity, and you better follow up on that effectively in the subsequent steps of the funnel. So that's the second hook example. So let's keep rolling. Okay, so after the hook, what are we going to do? We then want to elaborate, because typically the hook is one or two sentences. That's it. We don't have a lot of space. We don't have a lot to really share. We just want to get them interested. Now, with the why elaboration, we have the chance to go deeper, to deepen that interest, to deepen that curiosity, that intrigue, that excitement, before hitting them with the details. But at the same time, not just wandering around and providing endless information to them, which a lot of writers do. No, we're really building towards a point. Remember, this is a funnel. So the other thing that this why elaboration does is it helps to resolve what I call the frame clash between your paradigm and your reviewers. And I only have a brief moment to cover what that is, because I've done a whole webinar on that in the past. But the idea of the frame clash is that often you have your perspective on what's going on in the field and what needs solving or fixing, and your reviewer has a quite different perspective of what needs solving or fixing. Plus, your reviewer also knows that they're reading a proposal and that people want money, and so that's part of their frame as well. So it's sort of a skeptical frame too. So you have this clash between your frame of, I think this is what's going on in the field, and I want the money, and them being skeptical and thinking something different is going on in the field. And often these two different points of view clash. So we have to resolve this clash if we don't want our reviewer defenses immediately raised. And if the defenses are immediately raised, then it's much more likely we will get a rejection before we even get into the rest of the proposal. Just right here in the first paragraph, I've seen it happen so many times. Or why elaboration allows us to use a layering of problem and solution to bring the reviewers in more and get them more on board. So here's an example, and it's a somewhat long example. Many of the client examples that I have are shorter. there's one that skips this altogether, goes straight from the hook into the next thing, although in that case it was quite obvious. So I'll read this. In particular, the mechanisms regulating protein translation play a significant role in human disease, but determining how the cellular machinery chooses a transcript to be translated into a protein remains an elusive goal. The Encyclopedia of DNA Elements project focused the efforts of multiple groups to characterize the RNA products of targeted gene-rich regions totaling 1% of the human genome. This project painted a picture of significant complexity, uncovering a great deal of transcription beyond that previously predicted, including alternative splicing, new exons, and overlapping transcripts. About 86% of genes are alternatively spliced, with an average of 5.7 splice variants per gene locus. This transcriptional complexity complicates the problem of determining which RNA products are subsequently translated into proteins and under what conditions. There's a dearth of information directly regarding translational processes, and filling this gap will be a crucial component of a fully annotated human genome. So what this does is it presents data to say that, hey, there's something rotten. I was going to say rotten in Denmark, but I don't know where that expression came from, and it's a very silly expression. We might have people from Denmark on the presentation, but there's something, conveys this idea that something is going on that is not, that it's highly unresolved. So it just deepens and clarifies what it is that's unresolved about figuring out the nature of the functional project. Yeah, from Hamlet. That's right. I had forgotten that that's from Hamlet. Oh boy, I need to go back to my Shakespeare. Okay, so in any case, that's what we're doing. We're deepening the why. We're building on that hook and saying, there is a reason to pay attention to this. We're dealing with things that are important, that have relevance and recency to the whole community, not just to my own personal, like what I want to do, no, to what the whole community may be interested in resolving. So that's the why elaboration. And by the way, thank you for those who pointed out that was from Hamlet. Again, oh, my memory. So the next step is the paradigm. The paradigm for what? Now, we're making this transition, and on the grant story funnel, I have these divided into sections: the why, the what, the who, and the how. Those of you who have read my book, 4 Steps to Funding, might recognize these, because that book initially introduced this concept from some learning theory that we have these stages: the why, what, who, and how. And so I've talked about those for years, but now we're really chunking this down into what specifically do you do in each section. So we're making that transition from the why to the what. And the why is why pay attention. The what is this really about? What is the theory? What is this dealing with? So our primary goal for this part, the first step of the what, which is the paradigm step, is our trust building. We've focused on desire mostly in the why part. And now we got to make sure we cover the trust angle, that they believe us as a reputable person to be talking about this, that we know what's going on in the community, we understand the theory, and we can actually educate them a little bit. So they're like, okay, that makes sense. We're also really pre-framing to establish the necessity of more work in the area. We're beginning that. And all of these first 4 steps or so of this part are doing that pre-framing, not just this one step. We're educating the reader. I can't overemphasize how important it is to educate our readers. They are not focused on the same things we're focused on. And it's so common to just throw a bunch of facts, a bunch of acronyms, a bunch of technical details at our readers and let them sort it out. Oh, they're smart. They know what's going on. I don't want to bore them. But no, we have this chance to actually get them on board and educate them, remind them of what the important thing is at this point in the story. So we're educating them about that. And in the process of educating, we're building authority and gravitas. The other cool thing is that NIH has this requirement that you assess or look at the rigor of the prior research. Now, you're going to probably do more of that in your significance section of your proposal. But this is the place you can start that. You can show that you acknowledge the prior research and its rigor or lack thereof right here in this paradigm for what, and in what's missing in the next step as well. So here's an example. Now, I've mixed up these examples from different areas to show you how this applies to completely different areas. I debated whether to take you through a single proposal or a single specific aims page or mix it up, and I decided it would benefit more people to see more of a variety. So this is from the proposal that I mentioned that I had rewritten to use the grant story funnel. So a major challenge is identifying what risk factors impede HIV care and ART initiation, along with sustained adherence to treatment, particularly in African American and Latino people with HIV. Known individual level factors impeding treatment and adherence include substance use, distrust, and fear. In addition, there are social factors including stigma and structural barriers such as limited access to ancillary services. To address the individual factors, we draw upon self-determination theory, emphasizing the importance of durable intrinsic motivation for behavioral change. At the social and structural level, we apply the theory of triadic influence. Now, I rewrote this from one where, this component was there, but these were at a different place in the story. And so I brought them together. So it's not perfect, but I did have permission to share this from its author, and the author did review it, although apparently neither of us reviewed it well enough because there was at least one missing word there. That gives you an idea. What's the theory we're talking about? So we're talking about risk factors that impede HIV care and adherence to treatment. And then we're going deeper into, well, what impedes HIV care? Well, there are these individual level factors, and there are social factors. And then we bring in this thing called self-determination theory, which is, as far as I understand, I'm not in this field, but this social or self-determination theory is a theory to address these things. And this theory of triadic influence. So we're bringing in several things to just tell the reader, we know what's going on, but not just, hey, we know what's going on because we're so cool, but also to make sure the reader understands what's going on. So that is the function of that section of the proposal. Now, what I want to do is really quickly do like a short public service announcement, just because sometimes people have to leave early, and I don't want you to miss this in case you do have to leave early. So we still have, I think, 2 spots in our grant foundry that's starting very soon. And it's about teaching and mentoring you to apply this grant story funnel in your grant proposals. So there are just a few details. I only have a few slides on this. So we're going to guide you through the application of this grant story funnel for 3 months online, on the phone and on webinars like this. And it's capped off with a live in-person workshop on May 4th through 6th. And it's with a small group of peers who are committed to getting much better at this. So we capped the group at 8 people. And in this, you have an assigned writing coach that's one of us who's had R1 funding before. And you get this assigned writing coach to give you regular feedback. And the calls that we have regularly provide an accountability structure for you to get the work done. Because one of the things I've discovered with clients is it's really tough to get the work done. There's so many different pressures and things going on for people. But having a basic accountability structure can really help you make the forward progress, because this is a skill you have to practice over time. And if you're not doing work on a consistent basis, it's unlikely that you'll develop the skill very fast. I've been learning guitar. Some of you have heard me say this, but I've been learning guitar for the last 2 years or so, and I take lessons every week. And the biggest thing the lessons do for me, they help with the feedback, but they also just force me every week to think about, oh, I should practice. Okay. So that I don't show up having made no progress. It's really important. Some benefits of Grant Foundry is accountability so that you can practice more. and get the work done. You get regular feedback so that you're sure you're on the right track. We give a deep dive look at your work at the live workshop with myself and the team. So the last few times we've done this, we spent 3 days in a small group just iterating on your proposals so that what you've been working on is ready for a submission. And in this case, we've timed it to be about a month before the June NIH R01 deadline. So that's pretty cool. And we give some tough love to help you overcome ego tricks. I said trips. Either one would apply that prevent you from rocking this. It's not just easy, oh yeah, it looks awesome, go. It's often, yeah, that's good, but that could use some more work. And here's how, here's why, here's what you need to do. And sometimes the ego doesn't like to hear that, but that's what I had to go through to really change around my grant writing, is getting that kind of, hard cutting, deeper feedback. How to apply the Grant Foundry is an investment. I'll just say this up front so nobody's surprised. It's one that pays off, certainly, but the normal tuition is $7,000. And for making a commitment by next Monday, we do discount it a little bit. You probably can't even see the bottom of the slide. Let me fix that. So you get a $500 discount for enrolling by January 27th. So this link that I provide you here is just a letter that describes a little bit more of what it is. And then that takes you through a link to the application process. And we do have an application and an interview process. The application is for us to assess that you're a good candidate for this, that you are likely to benefit from this, because we really like working with people who do the work and who benefit from it. But it's frustrating when people pay this tuition and then don't show up or don't do the work. I would much rather work with people who are doing the work and making progress, and who then go tell a success story to us and to other people. We have the interview process where we get on the phone with you, just a short call to make sure it's a good fit for you and a good fit for us. So there's no real commitment until after you talk to us. And then if it's a good fit for both of us, that's where you can put a deposit down, and then we can do university purchase orders, or sometimes people pay privately because this is important enough to them that they want that funding. And so that's all I have to say for now about Grant Foundry, but I do encourage you, if you're ready to really deepen your skills, to go ahead and apply and at least talk to us about it and see if that's a fit. So back to the Grant Story Funnel regularly scheduled program. So the next step in the funnel, in this what part, is the missing link. What's missing in this paradigm that you just described in the previous step? What's missing? So we're back to desire building, and you'll notice now that throughout the rest of the funnel, we're alternating trust, desire, trust, desire, trust, desire. That's one of the best ways I've found to make sure that you balance those two aspects and don't go overboard on one or the other, which, again, many people do. So in order to build that desire, we're showing, well, why or how is this paradigm incomplete at this point? And we're really trying to get your reviewer on board with a, quote, common enemy, aka a problem in the field. Yeah, so I see the comment from Robin. Have to go meet a collaborator. Can you still send the PDF? Yes, I think my team is working on that. So we will definitely send that to you, to everybody who was here at the time I started having technical problems. It's the least I could do for you hanging out through the problems that I had. So we will send that out to everybody and have a great meeting. So anyway, getting people wanting to find out your solution. This is a big one. I said earlier, there was this pre-frame that we're doing throughout these initial steps of the what. And this pre-frame, the idea is by the time they get to this step down below, the what, your objective or your hypothesis, that they actually crave it, they desire it. And so so that's what we do, is in this step, we want them to find out the solution. So here's an example of the missing link. This is from one of my own proposals. And I'm talking about methods for mapping proteomic data directly to genomes to find out which genes are expressed. So that's the theory part, or the paradigm part, that I had just presented before this. And then I say both methods have limitations. With the bottom-up method, it is difficult to find and analyze all of the peptides associated with each protein, so there are usually gaps in coverage. Top-down is limited because a single mass measurement can be assigned to multiple isobaric equal mass combinations of modifications, so it is not definitive. So basically what I'm saying is, in this combination of the previous step and this step, is like, hey, there are two paradigms. There's this top-down paradigm, which can give us some information. There's this bottom-up paradigm, which can give us some other information. Both of these by themselves are incomplete. And so that creates a gap. That creates the idea of, well, okay, now we have to do something to bring them together. And that's what I then proceed to do in the next steps of this proposal, which we'll talk about the next step in a moment. Yeah. All right, receive the PDF. Cool. All right, so deeper exploration is the next step. Now this, so many people are in a rush to bring in preliminary data as soon as they can, or they're confused about, where do I put my preliminary data? Where do I mention it? How do I mention it? And this is the perfect place to put it. Why is it the perfect place? Well, I don't know if I believe in true perfection, but I believe it's a very good place to do it, because we've now established the paradigm and what's missing. And so that's the point at which to say, and here's what we've done to figure out what we can do about this thing that's missing from the paradigm. Here's where we started exploring it. Here's where we did the legwork. Here's where we did the literature research. Whatever we did, here's what we did, and here's what we found about filling that gap of what's missing in the paradigm. So this is another trust building step. When you present your preliminary data, some key piece of preliminary data, here on your specific aim stage page, in this stage, it shows what you've done. And it builds that authority and street cred that you know what you're doing, and that you have the resources to make things happen, and that you have made things happen. So I show you this example because it's such a strong example. Now, this R01 was, again, from a client who now also works to teach, works with me in teaching the Grant Foundry, because she started as a junior faculty member, and right away on her very first R01 try got a 3.1 percentile score. It might have even been better than that, but I'm pretty sure it was 3.1. I remember a 3. Yeah, it was 3.1. My memory today is just not that good. I'm a little bit sick. So, so anyway, she hit this on the first round of submission, and then proceeded to get several others funded right away, and did an awesome job. And she likes teaching. I recruited her to help teach this to others. And this is really strong, but it's a bit long again. Therefore, we developed a PTE mouse model that recapitulates diffuse TBI without focal injury. Mice that underwent repetitive diffuse TBI, RDTBI, presented with spontaneous seizures 3 weeks later. So this is quite already, this sentence is action-packed, or 2 sentences, because they developed a mouse model. Like, that's an important resource they've created for themselves and for the community, and that it recapitulates this diffuse TBI. And then they present, here's what we found with these mice when we use these mice in this model. I always feel sorry for the poor mice, but that's just me. I'm not in that field, so I understand why they do what they do. So in any case, it goes on. Importantly, just hours after the injury, several key astrocyte homeostatic proteins were downregulated. In these areas, loss of whole astrocytes followed, resulting in cortical and hippocampal areas devoid of astrocytes. To establish causality between seizures and astrocyte loss, we experimentally ablated about 60 cortical astrocytes in otherwise uninjured mice. This was sufficient to induce freezing behavior and EEG spike waves indicative of brain hyperexcitability. These data suggest that early loss of astrocytes after diffuse TBI may contribute to neuronal dysfunction leading to PTB. Now, another thing about this example is that here's a new investigator, first R01 ever submitted, and, so still relatively unknown, although she was coming from a lab in her postdoc that was reasonably well known in the field. But she wasn't. And she was also challenging this paradigm. So the previous paradigm, I know this because I worked with her on this proposal before she submitted it. She was challenging this paradigm that said, well, when we have these this post-traumatic epilepsy, it must come from the neurons themselves, not these weird astrocyte things that aren't neurons. And so she's challenging the paradigm. So she felt that she had to present a stronger case for her preliminary data and what it showed in order to overcome the natural skepticism that reviewers might have towards some new paradigm from an unknown person in the field. And it's actually quite amazing that she did this so well. But she iterated on this she has had 28 different versions on her computer, she said at the end, because she saved versions periodically in case Microsoft Word ate things. So 28 different versions over a period of about 5 months. I remember working with her on this. And yeah, it was an intensive effort, but it paid off. All right, so that's the deeper exploration. What's still missing? Even after the exploration. So this is another step that often people forget to do, and it's really important. Our primary goal here is desire building, because the previous step, we're really trying to build up trust that says, look, I know what I'm doing. So now we have to go back into desire and say, well, there's still more to do. There's still a reason to receive funding in order to spend the next 4 or 5 years working on this. And that's why you should give us funding. So this is where the pre-frame comes together for the objective and hypothesis. And it helps, if you do this well, avoid the preliminary data trap. And the preliminary data trap is that you're essentially presenting so much preliminary data that it seems like the work is already done. And if the work is already done, then why do you need funding to do work that's already been done? It doesn't really make sense. That's not very desire-inducing. So this step provides the contrast to avoid that particular trap. So the what's still missing example is from the same proposal. I just thought it was really important to give you continuity on this one. So we just had that previous one that I showed you, and now, yet the upstream molecular mechanism inducing astrocyte loss and the downstream physiological consequences on neurons and neighboring astrocytes must be identified to ultimately find targets for interrupting the progression to PTP. So it's short and it's sweet, but it really makes the point that there's more work to do. And we're about to tell you what the more work is. Okay, so don't forget this step, please. It's critical, absolutely critical. I saw one client that really didn't do a good job of this step, and she had revised a proposal. She had done more work that the reviewers had asked for in the previous reviews. She resubmitted it, and it came back just 2 or 3 points off of the pay line, and they said, you've done too much of the work. There's not enough left that you need to do here. And that was their main critique that prevented her from getting funding. And that was in the days where you could only do the 3 applications, the initial and then 2 revisions. And so she was done at that point with that particular project. I mean, there are ways to sort of repackage it and stuff, but it was a very frustrating situation. So please don't skip that step. So the next step is also vital. All of these steps are. This is the what, your objective or hypothesis. Now, depending on what field you're in and what kind of work people do, some study sections, some fields are very hypothesis focused. And if you don't have a hypothesis, you will be immediately seen as somebody who doesn't know what's going on in the field. Others typically don't work on hypotheses. So this step covers either one. either one fits here, and we have a model for this. And so I'm seeing some feedback asking for the entire slide deck. I haven't prepared this for sending out. I will consider it, but that's something that we haven't prepared to do. So I'm not going to send that to you right this moment. So I apologize for that. But you know, there's only so much I can do while giving a webinar. So the primary goal of this is trust building. We present this hypothesis or the objective, and we use the triangle of trust model. It's a great model for showing how to construct this. And I'll show you this really quickly on the next slide. It shows that you're a solid thinker and that you'll do something important to fill the what's still missing of the previous step, that you will solve that problem, that you will fill that gap. And so, triangle of trust, what does that look like? So we have in a triangle of trust 3 steps. We have the A, the B, and the C. The A is the starting point. It's the data that you have right now. It's where you're at, or some action, some trigger, like if you're looking at a molecular pathway, it's the trigger for the molecular pathway. It's that starting point. The C is the ending point. It's where we end up at in that pathway, or in the bigger picture, if you're doing an objective-driven proposal, it's where the objective, once you're successful, will take you. And the B is this hypothesized connection. It's the action or method to be used, studied, or developed that links the A and the C together. So in your proposal, all of these preceding steps should establish solidly both the A and the C. I have this little note here I'm just going to delete that said this needs to be refined. So we have both the A and the C. And what we need is now at this step to say, okay, we need this more solid B. We need this more detailed B in order to really put these A and C together. So this was developed based on inspiration from a few references that Stephanie actually developed the core of this, and then I refined it further. So there are just a couple of the references she used to develop this. So here's an example. The goal of this project is to improve functional annotation of the human genome. So that's the C, the functional annotation of the human genome. That's the end goal. Okay, so that's the C part. By developing advanced software tools to perform proteogenomic mapping in a high throughput manner on large publicly and privately available proteomic data sets. That's the B. So you might say, where is the other thing, the A? Okay, so that part was present in the previous steps of the funnel. We built to that step by step of showing what's missing. There's this connection between, there's lots of proteomic data and we want a fully annotated genome, and our B is to connect those together by development of these methods. So there's a lot more to this, but hopefully you get the idea from that example of what we have to do to link those. So then what? Now that we've presented this objective, or a hypothesis would equally well fit here if it's a hypothesis-oriented proposal, then what we do? Then what do we do? Well, this is another opportunity to establish more trust. A lot of people say, well, the reviewers will read the bio sketches, won't they? We don't need to say anything about our team right here. And technically that is true. Technically, they should read the bio sketches, but should and will, and in what order, the real world is often different than our sort of idealized fantasy of how it should be. And what I've discovered and other clients have discovered is that if we actually tell a reader right here and now why we are the right people to be doing this at this particular time and place, and why we're poised and ready to do it, that helps, it gives them a shortcut so that they don't have to go hunting through the whole application packet to figure out, do these people know what they're doing? Where are they at? Are they the right people to do this work? We can just answer that question right here with just a sentence or two. So yeah, we just leave no lingering doubts, which is each step of the funnel is, again, designed to do that. So the who example. This is from one of my funded, this was a renewal R01 that got a 2.1 percentile on the first round of submission as a renewal. In our existing collaboration that has been previously funded by this grant, we have made substantial progress building the foundations for accurately and quickly mapping proteomic data to genomic sequences. In this competitive renewal, we are proposing to continue and expand these efforts, blah, blah, blah. So the actual core statement, the who, is just this sort of purple, light purple colored single sentence. It's not a big long tome. It doesn't take a lot of space. But what it does is, since this was a renewal, I knew one of the big things reviewers would be wondering in their minds is, have they made progress? And I didn't want them to have to go hunt to find out whether we've made progress. So I said it right here. We made progress. And I cited references. And this was after only 2 years. This was a very short, the preceding R01 we had that I was renewing was only a 3-year R01 because that institute typically only gives 3-year R01s. So this was after 2 years. We only had 2 publications, but at least we had some. So that was a lot better than none. So that establishes we know what we're doing. All right, so on to the aims lead-in. So this is a very simple, sometimes people almost skip this, but I like always having one. It's just really building a smooth story flow. It's just a few words, short sentences, and it's the bridge between the what section of the funnel and the who section of the funnel. So the lead-in example from one of my proposals, the one we just saw, in fact, is in this competitive renewal, we are proposing to continue and expand these efforts with the following aims. Boom. Voila. That's probably the simplest part of this whole funnel is this. So if you can get this, you can get everything else, right? All right. So let's dive into the aims then, which is the how part of all of this. And I'll just show you for aim 1, since we don't have time to go through multiple aims and get into the nuances of how to balance all the things between the aims. That's for another time. But we'll go into the fundamentals of the aims. So for each aim, if you look here, and I know it might be small on the screen, especially since this is not showing in full screen mode, but we have 2 parts for each aim. We have the objective part for each aim, and then we have the methods part for each aim. And this division between the objective and the methods is really important. And many people just dive right into the methods right away instead of having this separation. So our goal for each aim is first we build desire, and then we back that up with trust. Okay, that was fun. So our desire part is the objective, and our trust part is the methods. So what we're doing in this objective part is saying, well, what important subproblem of that objective or hypothesis will this aim solve? In other words, what will the outcome be? What do the reviewers, the community, the scientific knowledge base, what will be produced if this aim is successful? And I put this in another way, what will the reviewer, funder, community get or discover from its completion? So that's really important. All right, so an example of this is from another client's successful R01 proposal. Again, I have permission to share all of these, so please don't worry about that. I don't share random clients' stuff unless I get permission to do so. So aim 1 is to test the hypothesis that the pro-mitogenic functions of OLIG2 are primarily channeled through HDAC1. HDAC inhibitors currently in use are first-generation pan-DAC inhibitors with low potency. This aim, if successful, will help promote and develop paralog-specific drugs for gliomas. So this is a little bit longer than some of the proposals I've written that for this objective part. However, it really clarifies what we're trying to do in the objective part of the aim. I think this sums it up. This aim, if successful, will help promote and develop paralog-specific drugs for gliomas. Couldn't be more clear than that. That's awesome. I think this is a fantastic example. So then what do we do to follow that up? Well, then we present the methods. And the goal is trust building. So we've just said this aim, if successful, will blah, blah, blah. So we've created desire. That's awesome. Now, the if successful part, we've left the reviewer with this thought in their mind. Well, will this be successful? Is it likely to be successful? Okay. So now we have to back that up with the trust. What methods or approaches does your community trust? We want to really choose appropriate leading edge methods. I can't emphasize that enough. A lot of times, sometimes there is not a leading edge method you can use. Sometimes it's just some old technology that's been around forever, and that's the only way of doing it. Now, if that's the case, that's a chance for you to be more innovative and develop something newer or find a way of making that method, updating the method to work better. That's just a little side note. However, the more you can bring in sort of, here's what the community is talking about, here's what the community considers leading edge methods, the better off you're going to be in this step. Show them an approach that makes the most sense to solve that objective and hypothesis, while again, as much as possible being leading edge. But if the leading edge methods don't solve it as well as existing methods, then you got to find a balance between those two. Again, this whole thing of this aim must fit the bigger picture and the other aims. I should have put this sentence on the previous segment on the objective part of the aim, because really we need to make sure that all of our aim fits in with the overall objective, which is this blue thing up here. And if the aims don't clearly fit in with the overall objective, then people are just going to end up being confused. So here's an aims method example. It's from the very same example I just showed you so that you can have some continuity here. And it's a really good example. So that client, she built a clear case for why the aim, the objective of the aim, and now she's saying to analyze the effect of p53 status on OLIG2 HDAC1 interaction and vice versa, and to map the genes that are differentially regulated by OLIG2 and HDAC1 in normal versus glioma cells using ChIP-seq and expression analysis to assess the effect of HDAC ablation on OLIG2-mediated orthotopic tumor formation in murine as well as patient-derived cells. Okay, so it's pretty simple. It doesn't go into a ton of detail. This is another area that many people make mistake, is putting too much detail here. What we want to present is just some key things that reviewers can hone in on so they trust that you know what you're doing, such as p53 status, that you're going to use ChIP-seq and expression analysis, assessing normal versus glioma cells, and so on. So she's just putting key things into this, not hitting them with a litany of facts. Now, I want to show you just very quickly a structure you can use to sort of force yourself more into creating both the objective part and then the methods overview part together, which is the sentence structure of to accomplish objective, we will do such and such methods overview. And I'll show you an example of that, since that would be unkind of me to show you the theoretical without an example. So this is from a funded contract with the NCI that I co-wrote with several others, but I was the lead who worked on this specific aims page. And so we'll look at the to discover a promising new, oh yeah, and this is like messed up. I can't believe we had this grammar mistake here, but still, they liked our proposal. To discover a promising new candidate biomarkers from the 50 yearly samples provided by CPTAC, filtered through both biological and statistical criteria, we will carry out the following approaches. And then I'm not going to read all of the approaches, but approach 1, approach 2, approach 3, approach 4. So we have, just using that sentence structure, it forced me and forced all of us into this idea of we've got to get the objective out, and then for that objective, we will do the following things. Now, you don't have to write it, your end proposal that you submit, that way so that it doesn't look too much like a template or something. But I would suggest that you start that way because it's going to really guide your writing and make it more clear and more powerful, and make sure you hit both the objective and then the methods part. Okay, finally, we are at the end of the funnel. The last step of the funnel is the wrap-up impact statement, here way down at the bottom of the funnel. The primary goal of this is desire building. It's your chance to summarize the impact if you're successful with it. And it provides a glimpse of what comes next after this proposal. So there's this idea of future pacing, which great speech writers do, and so on. It's this idea of putting the reviewer into the state where they can see, oh yeah, if this is successful, then that will happen, and then that will happen, and that'll be awesome. So we want them to really get into that space, that mental space of excitement and desire, because they see what will come of this if you're successful. So it just reinforces the excitement to support you in this. Now, this is one thing that on one of my successful R01s, I left it off altogether. So sometimes it's not essential, but if I were to go back and redo that R01, I would put it there because it wouldn't have hurt anything. It wouldn't. There's almost zero likelihood that it would have decreased my score, which was a 3.2 percentile, as opposed to Stephanie's 3.1 percentile on her proposal. So, but it wouldn't have hurt, is my point. So let's do it. The proposed work will provide insight into the fundamental mechanisms that regulate OLIG2 function during normal brain development, as well as gliomagenesis. Targeting co-regulators of p-OLIG2 mediated tumor growth will have practical overtones for targeted therapy for glioma. So it just goes back to that big picture. It's almost like this funnel, in a sense, is a wheel. You could picture it as a wheel that turns around. It starts at the Y, and it goes full circle and comes back around again to like even a bigger picture Y. And often people start with a big picture Y like this. And I believe, based on many, many experiences with clients, that most people start too broadly or too specifically where they start their hook. And that the broader perspective is better put at this stage of the Y. Now, that doesn't mean go start throwing a bunch of facts at your reviewer right from the beginning. That hook is really important, and the hook is typically not going to be very fact-laden, but it's not quite so general as a statement like this one, which we wrap up with. So let's talk about 4 common mistakes. Initially I was going to do 3, but then I was doing it and I'm like, oh, I got to cover that one too. So I added a 4th, and I'll go through these quickly because I know time is running on, especially due to my technical challenges earlier. So what can go wrong? Well, one of the big things is skipping the objective in the aims. A lot of writers launch right into the what I'll do or how I will do it without building any desire for that aim, without building the idea of oh, if they're successful, this is what I'll get out of them doing this aim. It's confusing and it doesn't create excitement. So I put the little question mark here, and I will show you an example from one of my own early proposals. This was from a failed R01 that I did back in my days of getting lots of rejections. And literally, I said the specific aims we propose are number 1. I didn't even say specific aim 1. It's number 1, protein preparation and detection. This aim will focus on 3 aspects, blah, blah, blah. So back to why I'm doing this, it's because I've made so many of the mistakes that I see clients making, and they're all preventable mistakes with practice and with training. So I really, when I look at this, I cringe. because it's so bad. Because there's nothing for the reviewer to chew on and say, here's why I would want to support you in the doing of this aim. And it's no wonder that they gave me a 52 percentile score, which these days would be triage, surely. Okay, so the next one is an ineffective hook and its follow-up into the why. This is a really big one. Often with clients, I iterate a lot with the hook and the why, because it's really hard to produce something that's truly engaging and interesting and gets them wanting to read more. And so people just get sloppy with this or lazy with this or struggle with this or whatever and produce an ineffective hook. And sometimes people just say, hey, here's the thing I'm going to do. And it produces that frame clash. It raises reviewers' defenses and right away gets them not on your side, and instead sometimes even immediately looking for reasons to reject you. And if they find further reasons to reject you, it's just a snowball effect. So another mistake is starting too low or high in the funnel. So again, I'll take an example from my own. My clients are a little bit more reluctant to share their mistaken examples. So I just share my own, not to make anybody but me look bad. So this is the beginning of a specific aims page. I wrote, our broad aim is to develop a new method based upon experimental detection of proteins for identifying and characterizing protein coding genes in the human genome. So boom, I'm just hitting them over the head. Here's what we want to do. Why don't you fund us for this? Well, I've given no lead in. I've developed no why, I've developed no what, I've done none of that stuff. I'm just hitting them over the head. Very ineffective, immediate turn off, or, unless somebody's like super, super excited about this, but even then, they're just kind of like, huh, what? Why do we need a new method? What's based on experimental detection of proteins, huh? It's just like I read it now and it, again, just makes me cringe. And this is actually from the same proposal I showed you the previous mistake from. So I'm surprised they didn't triage me, but in those days, it was a little bit easier. These days, a lot more are triaged than this certainly would have been, like I said. Skipping the objective pre-frame. This is the next on our mistake list. In other words, people skip this step. It's like they just cross it out and say, well, I don't need to tell people what's still missing. Here's my awesome preliminary data. Here's how awesome we are. And then launching into, and here's our objective. And often that leaves the reviewer saying, well, what? Huh? Like, what are you going to, really? Like, haven't you already done it? Or what's really the difference between what you've done and what you're going to do? They sound really similar. People get confused and frustrated, and often this leads to rejection because it kills desire. The desire for having you do more work on this. So an example of that is, I think this is the same proposal, but basically I put a pointer and a question mark to where I could have built a lot of stuff that I didn't do. I mean, basically the paragraph you're seeing most of here was the only paragraph I had on this specific aims page, and I just expected readers to get it. I mean, it's crazy that I did this stuff. But anyway, so there was a lot of stuff missing in here, but one of the things that was clearly missing before the next statement of proteins will be separated by multi-dimensional liquid chromatography and blah, 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 is a statement of, well, what's missing? Why do you need to do this protein separation by multi-dimensional liquid chromatography and blah, blah, blah? Okay, so again, maybe not the best example because so much stuff was missing, but that was one of the things that was clearly missing here. And I've seen it missing in a lot of client proposals as well. So the fourth one, I think we're at the fourth one, failure to bring the reader up to speed on the paradigm by educating the reader. A lot of times people want to dive right in, assuming the reviewer knows everything that they know about the subject from the perspective that they hold on the subject. And it just ends up being like this blizzard of facts and buzzwords that's presented in this second paragraph. And, it comes from sometimes an ego drive in some people that, hey, the more facts and buzzwords I put on the page, I'll impress them. I'll sound very rigorous and I'll sound very academic. But unfortunately, this often has the opposite effect. It produces confusion, and that kills trust, and it produces frustration, which kills desire. So we can kill both trust and desire in one fell swoop. Oh boy, that's a good one. And sometimes we leave this out altogether, which is even worse. Although, well, it's not always worse. Sometimes it's better to just leave it out than kill both trust and desire altogether. But either way is not conducive to funding. So a bad paradigm or what build? This is from my only triaged proposal ever. And this was an R21. And it was actually this proposal getting triaged that finally made me decide to go seek some ego driving or ego bashing feedback that it really did crush my ego to do a better job of this grant stuff. And over the next 2 years is when I really turned things around, working intensively with that mentor. So I actually start off the specific aims page right away trying to do what? I really didn't have a why at all. So that's another big mistake here, is just not having a why. But that's not the mistake we're talking about. So let's consider this as if I had attempted to build a why. And I sort of attempt to do this in the first sentence here, but it's hyperbole and all sorts of things that I would just not do. Okay, a key component of the adaptive process is the occurrence of compensatory mutations in the genome that offset the fitness costs associated with drug resistance, which can stabilize drug-resistant genes in a bacterial population. I'm trying to explain this, but I'm not talking about, I am attempting to educate. So on the surface, it might seem like I'm doing what I said to do, but I'm not educating from the perspective of here's what the field is doing. Here's where the field is at. Here are the challenges the field is facing. Here are the accepted paradigms going on within the field. So I create zero connection with the reviewer. I'm just sort of talking about this thing from out of the blue of compensatory mutations and so on. And then I just go on and on about it. So it's very disconnected, again, from where my reader is at. And that's what's wrong with this particular one. Even though I did attempt to do the education component, I'm sure it was not effective because this was triaged. Okay, and later on I added the who cares because I went back and looked at this and I'm like, oh, this is so bad, so bad. All right, so let's wrap this up. I thank you for hanging out this long. And I just want to say one thing about these mistakes and your reviewers. When you make one or more of these mistakes, your reviewer never says, hey, you're missing such and such part of the funnel, because until now, your reviewer probably has never heard of it. I mean, there are quite a few people on this, but it's unlikely that many of them are on study section, maybe a few. Sometimes I've had lots of clients who do study section. In any case, they're not going to say that even if they've seen this presentation. Instead, they pick on what is easiest to pick on. This is a key point to understand when you're interpreting your reviews. There are always things that are easy to pick on in your approach. Well, almost always. And so that is typically what people will pick on when they decide they don't like the proposal. They either don't desire this, or they don't trust this, or they don't desire and trust it. They have that combination of neither one. Okay, so then they just go looking for things to pick on, and often it ends up in the approach. So you often get feedback about, oh, such and such approach is no good, and we don't know about this, and we don't know about that. And then you go and you're the diligent applicant who revises this and addresses all of these flaws that they identified, and you write your nice cover letter that says, hey, dear reviewer, I addressed this flaw, I addressed that flaw, I addressed the other flaw that you brought up. And yet you were addressing things that were not the cause of the problem. You were addressing things that were the result or the end outcome of them looking for reasons to reject. So then you fix it and you resubmit, and then you get a score back that is similar or sometimes even worse. I've seen so many clients have that happen, and it's so frustrating. And then you're like scratching your head saying, oh, why is it so random? I fixed exactly what they said I should fix, and it didn't actually get a better score. Why not? And there are multiple factors that go into that, but this is a big one of those factors, is that often they got tripped up at one or more steps in the funnel, and it killed the trust and or killed desire, and then they started looking for reasons to reject you right then and there, and they found them. And that's what they listed on their reviews, which weren't the things that caused the problem. So this is a key thing to understand when you are revising your proposal. So a summary of key points of this overall presentation. The grant story funnel will help you structure your specific aims page to make sure you have all key points in place for a compelling proposal. Though each step is simple in concept, the application is often quite challenging. And I've just seen people have to iterate many times to get these steps really to fit together in the right way. It's not only getting each step in isolation, working well on its own, but then it's getting them to work together. So it really requires practice, iteration, and more practice. I've done the best that I can to fit this into roughly 90 minutes at this point, and it's a lot to cover in 90 minutes, but again, I did the best that I could. So if you want it to become useful to you, it is going to take this practice and this iteration. And I just want to say, we can help you with this application in Grant Foundry. If you're looking for more intensive help with this, we iterate with you, giving feedback along each step of the way. And you have that personal writing coach and a small group of enthusiastic colleagues. And our objective is for you to develop the skills of doing this, i.e., we would rather teach you to fish rather than just going and writing your proposal for you. I see that there are a number of services out there that try to write your proposal for you, but then you're relying upon them to do it, and instead of developing the skill where you can do it, or you can outsource it knowing exactly what you're outsourcing and knowing whether they're doing a good job or not, because you have the skills now to do a great job. I can take just one or two quick questions. So, yeah. Yeah, great question. What if the proposal is not hypothesis-based? So that goes back to right here, the what. So remember, I mentioned your objective or your hypothesis. So my proposals were not hypothesis-driven. My proposals, most of them were objective-driven. And so I'm trying to think of, yeah, so this is an objective-driven example that I gave you rather than a hypothesis-driven example, where I was saying the goal of this project is to improve functional annotation of the human genome by blah, blah, blah. Not going to reread it. And so that is already, there's an example of the objective-driven. Now, we could just as well put a hypothesis-driven statement here, and in other examples that I've presented in the past, we have hypothesis-driven things exactly at this point. So either one will fit right at this step. So that was a great question.